This is Sporting Life.
Well, welcome along to the Sporting Life Racing podcast. David Orr, joined by Billy Nash, Ed Chamberlain, David Johnson and Graham Cunningham to look at one or two news stories and back on a fascinating weekend that we've just had on both sides of the Irish Sea. And GC, it's a big weekend coming up for a few reasons, one of which, mainly, Franny Norton's bringing the curtain down on a fantastic career and fittingly at Chester too.
Yes, morning all. Hope everyone's good. Yeah, it's a significant retirement, this, because he's been a very good, colourful jockey for a long time. 1991 Ebor Handicap, his first big win. Deposky, Michael Stout, as was, a 3-year-old with 7 stone 3, F. Norton claiming 5, put up 1 pound overweight, poor show, won by 5 lengths and 5 and 5 in an Ebor. But so many other big winners. A good Irish one, Billy. She's our mare in the Cambridgeshire. Remember for Tony Martin?
Oh, yeah, I'd forgotten about that, actually, yeah.
Ayr Gold Cup, our Jonathan for Kevin Ryan. The Dante on Permian for Mark Johnson. See the horses Permian beat that day in the Dante. Ben Battle, Crystal Ocean and Rekindling. Won a stack of big races between them. And of course, making miracles in the Chester Cup, a romp in 2019. My only close-up experience of Franny Norton, I went to do a feature at Liverpool University on Jockey's Nutrition, a TV feature. And Franny has always been part of that nutrition program, insisting that you can eat well and still ride light and be mentally happy and physically healthy. And he had the sparring gloves with him, the big 16-ounce ones. And he was a good fighter in his day, really good fighter. And he was trying to persuade me. And I said, no chance. And he stood in front of me with these huge gloves. And I promise, it was like a bloody blur. It was, I promise he could have knocked me out in 3 seconds. Incredibly fit, athletic and colourful fella. And he'll be missed, I think, by a lot of people. But in his early 50s now, pretty much the similar age as Frankie Dettori and Joe Fanning, but a major career behind him for Franny Norton.
And David, he was always a rider who punters had on their side, was he? Very strong in the saddle. And I mean, he's been a stalwart, as GC said, of that northern scene for decades now.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think that's what you look at going through his CV. I don't think he ever quite managed a Group 1. He did finish runner-up in a ledger on Sir Ron Priestley and won a couple of Group 2s on him, but it wasn't about what he was doing in the big races. On a typical Saturday, he'd probably be at the second and third meetings of the day, and that's one of the reasons I think maybe why he did so well at a track like Chester, who often would race on the Saturdays and wouldn't be the feature meeting, but you knew that if Franny was riding your horses there at the aways, that you were going to have an absolute real good chance because, everybody knows Chester in particular, he rode better than anybody. And he's just sort of the embodiment of what longevity, consistency and reliability can do for a career, isn't it? And like I say, he didn't necessarily do it on the big days, but he's just like one of hundreds that we've seen down the years that keep the show on the road and don't do it in the spotlight, but the game is absolutely ultra reliant on.
Yeah, it'd be fantastic to see Franny go out with a winner or two at Chester on Saturday. As we're recording this, it's 11:09 on the 18th of September. So obviously we need to talk Cheltenham Festival. Ed, a Racing Post exclusive, Peter Scargill, that the Turners novice chase switching to a handicap. The cross country going to be a handicap. This is part of a big review for Cheltenham. Seemingly this is only part of it. What do you think they need to get right at the Fez? Because it's already a split opinion. Dan Skelton and Paul Nicholls at war over the decision.
My point of view, the most important thing is the customer service, to be honest, Audrey. This is all very nice and good news and a good step, and I approve of it. And there's clearly, this isn't the official press release. I'm not sure how this one got out, but I'd imagine it might have been a sponsor. I don't know, but sounds like there's more to come. It sounds like a official press release will be imminent. And this is good, encouraging, but from my point of view, if they want to fill Cheltenham again and sell out again, it's the customer experience they've got to improve. And the hotel situation that we talked about last week is a step in the right direction. I think there's going to be a real emphasis on a different feel on the day, a better welcome, hopefully the introduction of racemakers, good value for money, hopefully will be part of that. So that would be my priority in all of this. And I'm encouraged with what I'm hearing, but nothing's official yet.
Billy, it's been a numeric. I mean, there's 11 this year. It's been numerically, it's been a struggle sometimes. The turners, was it a novice grade one that we just didn't need at the Fez?
I'm not sure about that. I think it had its place, but do we need another handicap at the Fez would be my question. I think there's plenty of them, and certainly another novice handicap chase. I'm not sure this is the race that I would have tinkered with first, Artie. If I was let loose on this festival, I don't think the turners are the first one I'd have taken a knife to. I think the 4 mile chase or the National Hunt chase in my opinion, that's a race that needs to be looked at badly. I don't think the turners was the big problem. The cross country, I can see making that a handicap chase is fine. There's no issue with that. It might still be won by the Delta Works and these horses, these classy horses that will run in it, and they'll carry big weights and they might still be able to win it. But I think it will certainly make that more competitive. But I would hope there's more to come because, just those 2 races to me just looks like window dressing. So I would hope that there is more in the pipeline and surely we'll hear that over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'm sure we will be returning to the subject.
I actually, from what it's worth, I disagree with that, Billy. From my point of view, the turners was bad news for a big audience explaining champion novice chases. It made it impossible with all those 3 options. Yes, the 4 miler is a problem, but not as big a problem as the turners was. The lack of clarity in the build up to the race, the fields. I know it's had some quality winners, but it just makes the Arkle and the Brown Advisory now the championship races, which is much easier to explain and will be much more competitive as a result. So I think it's a good move.
Yeah.
I think
but if you're going to have a chase, a 2.5 mile championship race for open horses, I don't see why you wouldn't have one for novices,
Yeah,
I think it's rare that the National Hunt Chase ever takes away a horse that you look at and think, well, this horse would add plenty to the grade 1 3 miler, whereas obviously the 2.5 miler, virtually every year, anything that's running in that, you think, well, if that was running in the Arkle or if that was running in the Broadway, it would enhance the race. So you can sort of see why it does look like it's worth doing. So, but there's plenty of races there that could be chipped away at, isn't there, as well? So hopefully, like we've said, it's not just the 2 races that we've heard about so far.
Can I just make 2 very minor points? We're going to talk about Cheltenham ad nauseum over the next few months. First one, possible law of unintended consequences. A huge amount of the very best young horses are in very small number of hands now. So don't be surprised if you've only got a 2 mile and a 3 mile option. If one of the big trainers, we don't need to name them, says, well, I'm going to run A in that, B in that, and C can wait for Liverpool. A horse who would have gone to Cheltenham under normal circumstances, or Ferryhouse, or Punchestown, etc. You could effectively lose a pretty good horse or 2 here. And the other thing I'd like to mention is the novices handicap. I love that type of race, but don't be surprised if the same Irish trainers I'm referring to say, right, a bit like Michael Jordan said, I take this personally and say, right, I'll get one lined up in just the right way. And the right way might be to campaign them over here for a couple of 3 runs against the inferior Brits to make sure they're on the right side of the handicap when it comes to the novices handicap chase. Worth bearing in mind, Willie Mullins has never won a handicap chase at the Cheltenham Festival, and Gordon Elliott has never won that novice handicap chase. So I would think that there might be 1 or 2 long-term plans laid through the winter for that specific race next March.
Yeah, interesting subject, and one, as we say, we'll be returning to in the dark months ahead. Ed, we need to talk about crowds, and well done. 4 days, was it 3 days or 4 days at Doncaster? About 4 days, should get a badge for that, all the way through to the end of the Betfred St Leger Festival. Saturday, though, I was there Saturday, big, vibrant crowd, buzz, and up on previous years as well, attendance-wise.
Yeah, I wonder how they did it. I mean, ARC regularly get stick, don't they? I wonder how they did it. I posed that question on the weekend, 11% up on last year. I haven't quite managed to put my finger on how they did that, actually, whether it was really good advertising. how they marketed it. I know you could get in, a family of 4 could get in on Ledger Day to watch a classic for 38 quid, which is pretty good. Wildlife Park down the road was 100 quid. To watch Leeds United, Burnley, wasn't it, on Saturday, was over 200 quid. So that package might have appealed. It was loud. I mean, that's the loud. I love presenting at Donny. That is the loudest noise of anywhere I present, because obviously a Stan Clark course, you're in front of the grandstand, and it was rocking, wasn't it? Kinross got an unbelievable roar when he won, and then listen, how good a ledger it was, you know more than me, but the punters certainly loved it. 25,000. I don't know how many were at Leopardstown on Saturday, but Donny was absolutely rocking.
Yeah,
I
it's
guess the thing
significant. I think that you could add Leopardstown and the Curragh crowds together, and I don't think it would quite match the crowd that was at Donny on Saturday alone.
It matters less with the Ledger whether the winner ran to 123 or 119 or what. It just served up a really good race, and obviously the weather was superb for the time of year, wasn't it? And I was saying, you know, there's so few sites, in my opinion, that are as good as top quality flat racing when the sun shines, and that's exactly what Doncaster served up, and served it up well on Saturday. Yeah,
Yorkshire gets behind, South Yorkshire gets behind Doncaster, doesn't it? It's still one of those highlights of the Yorkshire calendar that the local crowd really do get behind. So I'm glad they got a big crowd. That's good news.
They didn't get behind the Prime Minister. You were there, weren't you, Audie? I mean, it was.
Yeah, well, I thought it was aimed at me.
It was vicious at times.
I was in the parade ring at just the same time. I'm still not convinced it wasn't 1 or 2 aimed at me. I will be taking legal action. I'm trying to get the video footage. Yes, it was a warm northern welcome for our current incumbent at number 10, wasn't it? Yeah, 1 or 2 chants more akin to Ellen Road, really, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But there you go. On Sunday, good to see Graham Lee at the races for the Ledger Legends race.
It was, but honestly, it's so sad. It is so sad. And yes, you know, people would say, "Oh, great to see him there," and he was smiling. But I found it brutal, to be honest. I found it absolutely brutal. His poor wife Becky, she stood with me while the photograph was being taken, and she never gets a minute. You know, she never gets a minute. Seeing them putting Graham into the car, and it was really, really hard. And I've got to know Robbie, the son, now, and I've just got so much admiration for him, bless him. But everyone can say, honestly, it was great to see him there and all this and all that. It was brutal seeing him like that. I just feel so sorry for him. It must have been horrible. I think he hated every second of it, to be honest with you, Audie. And then in the race itself showed racing almost at its worst a bit. It upset me a bit because, yes, Megan had a nightmare in a charity race where she worked really hard just to ride in the race and support Graham Lee, which is what it was all about. Yes, there was betting on the race, but no one deserves the abuse she got after that. Yeah. Absolutely horrible, really, really unpleasant, and just totally unnecessary.
I wasn't aware of that element to it. So it's just to be honest
with you, jockeys, I think, probably get it all the time from punters, and looking after her just gave you a glimpse into that. And yes, it went wrong for her, but no one deserves that, honestly, particularly in a charity race, for goodness sake.
There is an element that there's a small batch on Twitter. The people who used to shout at the XL commentaries in betting shops, weren't they? They've now got betting accounts, or Twitter accounts, should I say, and are able to shout to a wider audience somehow. But let's move on. Let's talk about the racing itself. Let's head to Ireland. GC, you were there. The Irish Champion Stakes Economics came out on top. What did you make of the race?
Good question, because I take a significantly different view than most people. I'm not knocking economics. I think when he gets the right proper galloping track and give in the ground, I think he'll win a good race by clear daylight. But I was amazed when, he's a pal and colleague and former boss of mine at the Racing Post. Bruce Millington tweeted Sunday, I think it was, "Be in no doubt, today we saw one of the all-time great horse races," which prompts me to ask, Dave, and I really implore you to put this on the poll. Which was the strangest take of last week? Bruce's take on the Irish Champion Stakes, or the eating the pets, which was the strangest one, because they both made me chuckle like mad. Because
I wasn't expecting that.
It was just a really good race. It always serves up a thrilling finish, or nearly always, that race. And I think economics is better than the results suggest. I was fascinated by a couple of incidents of jockeyship on Saturday. One was Shane Foley in the Group 2 two-year-old race, where he said to Ryan Moore effectively, no, I'll use your pacemaker, you stay out. And I was really fascinated to see Tom Marquand just getting a mini drop on Ryan Moore, just hemming him in on August Rodin on the bend. And Gus came and had his chance quick and well, went down fighting. Economics, I think, is a really, really good horse, and he'll win plenty more good races. But I can't rate that as anything like a world-class race with 6 of the 7 runners, 6 horses covered by 2.5, 3 lengths. So hats off to economics. But what do you think, chaps? I'll go around the windows here. Would City of Troy won that race? Would have won it? I would have won it. And how far would he have won it by? Because I think he'd have won it good looking.
Silence from the silence. I think he would have won it. I mean, Timeform numbers, David, did economics go up £2?
Yeah, he did. So economics now on 126p, August Rodin 125, and we do need to put that into context in terms of the ratings of the very best horses around at the moment. And City of Troy is on 130p, and the French horse who I always call Calatagan, which isn't what's he called?
Calandagan.
Calandagan, yes, the French horse 129p. So, you know, in terms of, I think economics v Calandagan is going to be a really interesting matchup, isn't it? They're due to meet at Ascot, where the ground might be a fair bit softer than what either of them ran on when they produced their career bests at Leopardstown and York. But economics for me does have a little bit of ground to make up on the very best horses, and you can't knock him for what he did. It was really difficult circumstances. If he'd have got beaten, it would have been so easy to understand why and make the excuses for him, but he didn't need them. So there is the scope for him to step up on it. But I think it is a little bit premature to be hailing him as the next big thing just yet, because as GC says, they've finished right in a heat. It looks a reliable enough result, but you know, he just doesn't look like he's head and shoulders above the rest at the minute.
And one of the weird things about flat racing, and it's circumstantial, it can happen, is we have this whole City of Troy who looks a champion, and we have this real up and coming who's had a very light season. They're never going to meet, and nobody will bat an eyelid. Strange, isn't it?
Yeah. No, that is very true. And Billy, that's probably the last we've seen of Augustus Rodin and August Rodin. Both of them will be bowing out from the European scene. I presumed it's Japan Cup now, is it? How are you going to remember him?
I'll remember him kind of like the little girl with the curl, Lordy. You know, when he was good, he was very, very good. And when he was bad, he was horrid, I suppose, you know. Saturday was one of his better days, in fairness. But the one thing that struck me watching the race was a quote of Aidan's during the year that August doesn't like to get down and dirty. And I think we saw that in the finish. I think, in fairness to economics, one of the things about that you'd have to really like about that performance is when he was challenged, he put his head down, he really battled, he really wanted it. At no point did I think Auguste Rodin was actually going to beat him. He loomed up there, he travelled well, he looked to have every chance turning for home. But I just felt when it really came down to the nitty gritty that economics wanted it a bit more. Good performance by the winner. I'd echo what GC said about Tom Marquand. I thought it was an excellent ride. You know, really proactive move down the back at Leopardstown to put himself in that position in the first place. And it paid off in spades. But you'd have to say, you know, really positive performances by some of the beaten horses as well. Big run by Shin Emperor in third can't be overlooked. I mean, as an arc trial goes, that's probably as good as you're going to get. With a clear run, he'd have finished right on top of them. And you'd have to think, looking at him, 1.5 miles will really suit him. There's various rumours that he was 70-80% right. I'm not sure how true they are, but if there is more to work on, then you know they must be delighted with him. That was a really good arc trial. And similar comments, I suppose, apply to Los Angeles, who back to 1.25 miles, not really his trip, but gave it a good go. Ran a really big race. So again, back up to 1.5 miles in Paris. We know he handles soft ground, which is a help as well. So you know the two of them, I think, really advanced their arc claims over the weekend. But yeah, it was a good renewal of the Irish Champion Stakes. But like GC, I wouldn't be saying it was one of the best I've ever seen.
Ed, you didn't get to show it on ITV. No Breeders' Cup Classic either.
We showed it just after the
Oh, probably I
event.
should have said live. Yeah, yeah. Is it frustrating that they're not going to be able to show City of Troy at Southwell on Friday and technically in Delmar as well?
That's a shame. And listen, both are a shame. Samar Prescott on Nick Luck's show is right. Re the RS Champion Stakes, we would be damned if we did, damned if we didn't. I understand totally why Leopardstown moved the time. Completely understand why they did that. Hopefully they can understand why a classic was our focus, and I understand why punters were disappointed about it. The lesson for me from it is, please, can we not have two of the highlights of the season within 15 minutes of each other? And ideally, let's not even have them on the same weekend and the same day. I think it's probably my lesson from it. Read the Breeders' Cup, Audie. I'm sure we'll show it again. It'll help when it's not on the West Coast from a scheduling point of view, I think. City of Troy is at the centre of our universe, but the truth is, on Saturday night on an entertainment channel, it isn't up there, I'm afraid. That's just the reality of it. And yeah, it's a shame, but hopefully we'll show it again in the future, but not this year.
Will you be showing the Arc? Is that still to
Yes.
be? Oh, there you go. Well, we are going to talk a little bit more about the Arc now. GC, Billy touched upon the two who just behind the leaders in the Irish Champion Stakes, underlining their claims for Paris Longchamp. Big day of trials in France and Wales. Socy's a new favourite for the Arc, having beaten Luke de Vega. Blue Stocking won the Vermeil. I asked Ben Linfoot to write a piece about where are you with the Arc right now. Where are you, GC, when it comes to the Arc right now?
Well, I have a feeling that it has to be quite a decent betting race, purely because David and Billy can back me up on this. I make it, there are 5 horses not running in the Arc who would all be top if they did. 5 of them. That's got to be unprecedented. Absolutely. From top to bottom, City of Troy, 130p. Calandagan, gelded, 129p. Economics, 126p. Goliath, the King George winner, 127, gelded. White Birch, 128. I would also toss in, I think Billy might back me up, the Oaks winner, who's retired now. Ezalea was looking like a potential Arc filly. And therefore, we have Socy, Luke de Vega, Los Angeles, Shin Emperor, Delius, Alrifa, Blue Stocking, and maybe Kyprios, more of him in a minute, all in the mix, very, very tightly matched. So it's a very different Arc than you would normally expect. But I think if you delve again, you might find a value bet in there somewhere.
David, have you started sieving through? What did you make of the weekend action?
Was that to me? Sorry.
Sorry, it is, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you can see why Socy has worked his way to the head of the betting. He's turned over Luc de Vega, who was obviously the French Derby winner that was the anti-post favourite. And yes, it's possible Luc de Vega might come on for the run a little bit more than what Socy will. But I'd be surprised if that form is turned around. There's one really interesting performance for me that has gone completely under the radar was Sparkling Plenty in the Prix Vermeil. Now, if you remember, she's one that was hopelessly placed at Goodwood, wasn't she, in the Nassau, and finished strongly from a long way back. And it was very much the same story in the Vermeil. She was just miles off the pace, and she's closed up only into 6th, but had no chance of getting involved. You know, you look where the winner, 2nd and 3rd, where they've raced compared to where she has. And you just think, we know that the way that the Arc trials are run, they're completely different to what the Arc itself is usually run. And I mean, she's trading at 33s, 40 to 1, something like that. She's obviously now part owned by Qatar, who very much obviously involved in the weekend. And I guess there's a possibility that she may run in the Prix de l'Opera. So you just want to be wary of that. But I think if she turns up for a Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe, she's not a 40 to 1, 33 to 1 chance, given that the way that an Arc is likely to be run will suit her far more better than what these last 2 runs at Group 1 level have.
Ed, a line on Blue Stocking, enjoying such a fantastic season. Another Group 1 for her. She's danced just about every dance this summer. Can you see her being a big player in Paris?
Yeah, with those missing, as GC said, why not? I mean, she's right up there, isn't she? And part of the Rafe Brigade that are having such a bonanza of things at the minute. And that was really good at the weekend. She certainly deserved that, didn't she? And if you look at those, she'd be really solid compared to some of them. It depends again what you think about the Irish Champion Stakes, because on the face of it, Los Angeles and Ginebra have run cracking trials, but they did all finish in a heap. How good is that form? And Al Riffa still looms large there, Billy, having the perfect prep, just watching them all beat each other with Al Riffa looming.
He can loom away.
on that subject,
In an each-way double with Corach Rambler.
I know Billy isn't an Al Riffa fan, but I know in the distant past we had the conversation about Kyprios as a potential art contender. Time form rating of 128, Billy, produced over longer trips. But if there's ever a year to have a dart with a horse like Kyprios, this might be the one.
Well, I must be honest, GC, I didn't have him on my radar for the race this year because I thought they were going to stick with to staying distances with him. But you're right, he does have a time form rating of 128 at his peak, which was actually recorded in the Prix de Cadran at Longchamp on soft ground. So thinking about it again after the weekend, we saw what he did in the Irish St. Ledger. He beat two pretty decent stayers in Vauban and Giavalato and beat them comfortably over a mile and six, good ground at the Curragh. He certainly didn't show, it wasn't just a grinding performance. He was in front early in the straight and he held them off. So I think he's probably deceptively quick. But when I was thinking about it, what else does Aidan have for the Arc? You've already mentioned City of Troy isn't going. We know Auguste Rodin isn't going to go there. Opera Singer, fluffed her lines in the Vermeil, so that's probably her out of the race. Content is a possibility, but they're talking about sending her to the States. He has Tower of London, who's probably going to go to the Melbourne Cup, I believe. Continuous is another one who didn't really do what he was supposed to do in the Prix. And then that kind of leaves them with Los Angeles, who has a decent each-way chance and probably nothing better than that. So, by process of elimination, it could well be that Kyprios now becomes an arc horse for Ballydoyle. And if the ground turns up soft, he'll give them all something to think about.
Yeah, one thing you weren't expected. Sorry, JC.
Who from the Vermeil, I think if you like blue stocking, you should keep a close eye on the French filly, 3-year-old filly, Aventure, who ran her pretty close and travelled really well. And the Vermeil was a much faster time than the other trials. But the problem is, she's by the same stallion, that's not a problem, but she represents the same owners, the Wertheimer operation, as Solzy. The Shima will go for the Opera and Solzy for the Arc. But I think if you're looking at big prices, and there are plenty of horses at big prices who with definite first four credentials, blue stocking being one of them, but Aventure's another I think is a bit under the radar at the moment. And
she was behind Sparkling Plenty in the Prix de Diane as well. So
Well, David, you're right to look at in a year missing those real A-listers. This type of horse is certainly capable of hitting the board in an Arc de Triomphe, I think.
Graham North, our time figure, gave a very sweet on Aventure. He's been putting him up antipose for the Arc.
Really?
Yeah, since the Prix. So be interesting. Check out North on Sunday, which gets published on Saturday. I said it was a bad title when Scoop came up with it, but it's still called North on Sunday. But his review of the Arc trials will be out on the site on Saturday. Let's talk St. Ledger, Betfred St. Ledger. Ed, it didn't have A-listers in it, but two stablemates served up a fantastic finish.
Yeah, it was a really good finish, wasn't it? A real thriller in the straight. Two contrasting styles, with Jan Bruegel sort of looking green with his head in the air and his stablemate with his head down, grafting away. And as you say, the noise was deafening, really, as those two battled it out. How good a St. Ledger is, I wouldn't be totally sure down the track, to be honest with you. And it'd be interesting to see what they do with the pair of them, with possibility of Melbourne and then Cup races next year, I imagine. But we shall see. I mean, on the face of it at the moment, it doesn't look like anything world-beating.
Billy, in terms of Jan Bruegel, we thought it was greenness at Goodwood with the head carriage and things. Do you think there might just be an element of that's how he does the job anyway? As he matures, or do you think the penny is going to drop and we're going to see a much more polished performer as a 4-year-old?
I think it's the latter, Dave. I think he is still learning. I think you could see it on Saturday. He was off the bridle before Illinois, but I always felt he was going to get by Illinois. I know he didn't beat him that far, but the minute he got to the front, he pricked his ears. I think there's more to come from this horse. I don't think we've seen, I don't know how high he'll go, but I certainly don't think he's reached the ceiling just yet. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's a horse that ends up coming back down in trip. I think he could win a decent 1.5 mile race next year. I'm not sure he's an out-and-out grinder. Let's not forget he hadn't seen the track until May of this year. So 4 from 4, I think there's definitely more to come from him. Illinois, I could see being a decent stayer next year. I think he'll go up in trip. There's talk of them going to the Melbourne Cup. Certainly, I don't think that would suit Jan Bruegel this year. I think he'd be far too green for a race of that nature. Just the hustle and bustle of a Melbourne Cup, I don't think would suit him. Now, maybe they'll send him there. But I would think that he could be a decent 1.5 mile horse next year. And again, we don't know exactly what sort of horses Ballydoyle will have for those races next year. So, I'm not saying he's going to turn out to be a top horse, but I do think there's good races to be won with him.
David, in terms of sort of the numbers, were they up to scratch with your normal ledger winner, those two?
We've got them both rated 120, which is probably a little bit below par. Continuous was 122. Elder of, I think, was 119. He was slightly below par. Hurricane Lane quite recently was as good as 126. So I don't think it's a great race this year. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'd be inclined to send them both down to Melbourne. Yes, it's possible that Jan Bruegel might be a little bit green for the race, but also the way that he races, he holds that ability back, doesn't it? And handicaps are won by well-handicapped horses. It's all right sending the likes of Vauban down there, but there's not a lot that the handicapper doesn't know about a horse like Vauban, whereas these 2 3-year-olds, they're very difficult for the handicapper to get a hold of. They're both potentially open to improvement, stepping up in trip. And, I don't think it's any surprise that some of the horses that have done well from European stables have got a very similar profile. Was it Cross Counter? I think he was a 3-year-old that won it, having won the Goodwood race that Jan Bruegel did. And obviously Rekindling, he was in the frame in a St. Ledger when he won it. So I think far more chance of winning the race with horses like this, with this profile, than the fully established sorts that are also going down there.
And GC, we might have seen a bit of history as well. Galileo 1-2 in the St. Ledger from his penultimate crop. He's just continued to deliver right to the very end.
Well, not quite at the end. Once Kyprios wins the Arc.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
But no, it was quite appropriate. I agree. I'd like to see, particularly Illinois, I think, for the Melbourne Cup. He's dead genuine, dead straightforward. I think he'd give himself every chance. I don't know the total depth of the race. And I wouldn't be quite so cool on Vauban as David. I thought he was, how shall we say, ridden with an eye to Melbourne at the weekend. And so, lots and lots of big races to look forward to on the flat still.
Let's talk about the sprinters and Billy Nash. I watched that Flying 5. I counted the Brits out. I counted them back. Didn't take much counting. It was just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. I just watched that race. I thought, how is Billy going to find an Irish horse to tip in the Abbey? That's my biggest concern going into the autumn. When does this crisis end, Billy, with the Irish sprinters?
Well, in my defence, at least I got the right Irish one. The first Irish horse home was the one I mentioned, Bucanero Forte. So I'm taking that as a small win, Ardy. Look, I don't think there's going to be an Irish winner at the Abbey this year. That's hardly news to anybody. Really good performance by Brad said. It's hard to argue that he's not the leading sprinter around at the moment, but you would have to say, a little bit like York, things did pan out well for him on the day. He was definitely better drawn than believing. You'd love to see the two of them taking each other on a level playing field, because he certainly has had the advantages on both of the last 2 starts. That's not trying to take anything away from him, but you'd have to feel a little bit for Connections of Believing, because she's been hard done by, I think, the last 2 starts.
Can I speak up for Billy for a moment?
Please do, Jason.
Sprinters. If you were producing this show properly, Dave Ord, you'd have a rag out of a quote from a couple of weeks ago. Do you know what I'm about to say here?
No.
It was when you were taking another of your lengthy holidays. And Ben Linfoot was producing this show a couple of weeks ago, asked us all for a horse to follow for the autumn. I put them in my personal record book. Ed, Thunder Run, not in the Cambridgeshire, but big entries to come at Ascot, so that could bear fruit. David Johnson, Calandagan, you'll get a price now against Economics in the Champion Stakes. I tried to be clever and pick one at Haydock the next day called Elladonna that got a bad run. Ben Linfoot went for Al Bashir for the Ayr Gold Cup, teed himself up very nicely for that race in the Portland last week. And Billy Nash, salute to Billo. He went for a horse called Fighter. I think, is it a Frankel, trained by Ian O'Brien, who just blossomed in Blinker's first time to win his maiden impressively. Direct quote, Billy Nash, he's got a mark of 90, Fighter, and I'd be amazed if he can't defy that. And he's in the Patingo handicap next week. Bolted up at, was it 9-10 to 1, Billy? Well done.
9 to 1, yeah. Teed it up for you there, Audie, but...
How many points went on, Billy? What were the points?
I don't know. Probably maximum points, or you know,
7 points each way, I believe, was quoted.
No,
very good.
That is a brilliant shot. Just returning to Bradsell and believing. JC, is there not just a chance that Bradsell's quicker? He's got more tactical speed, and he's just. If they were drawn together, he'd just get away from her.
I was thinking about this earlier on, thinking, well, if you're of the school of thought, and there are schools of thought that suggest believing was kiboshed at York and kiboshed at the Curragh, you might as well give her the champion sprinter crown. But you can't do that. And in the absence of a real out-and-out crack, Bradsell is in pole position to be champion sprinter. I thought he was terrific again. You can't go hard enough for that horse. And they've really got him back on song after a pretty serious injury problem. But something, again, there's always something flying under the radar. How would you think the atmosphere at Archie Watson's stable at the weekend when they win the Group 1 with Bradsell in Ireland and a real old stable favourite, Outbox, multiple big race winner, won a fortune in, was it Qatar, and won a big race at Newmarket, the Group 2 at the Guineas meet in the spring. And he sustained fatal injuries, I think, out in Sweden. And you think, what a weird, wonderful, but very, very punishing game this can be at times. But I admire Archie Watson. I think he's a really good trainer. Had another big winner at Doncaster in the Flying Childers, Asterius, who might be a more likely candidate for the Prix de l'Abbé than Bradsell if the ground gets on the easy side.
Which is what he did with Soldier's Call, wasn't it? I just think with believing, as someone who's backed her on both the 2 recent outings at York and then again on Sunday, which was probably a bit silly because I did actually know the draw when I went and backed her. I'd love her to win a Group 1, but, and again it happened on Sunday, she just hits a flat spot at the crucial time in a race. And both times Bradsell's been away and gone, and then she stays on again. So I just feel if she is going to get that elusive Group 1, it might be over 6 rather than 5.
But are you saying don't stop believing, Ed?
I haven't stopped believing.
Right.
Don't stop believing.
David, it's nearly the time of the year where we have to go into a dark room to do the Timeform Awards, decide on the various category winners. Will David Johnson be voting Bradsell for champion sprinter?
I think you have to, yeah. I mean, you sort of still, I see the 5 furlongs and 6 furlongs almost as a separate category, really. Bradsell very much dominates in over the minimum trip, and the 6 furlong horses, they just turn up and beat each other, don't they? So I think Bradsell does deserve that at the moment. Yes, it was easy to knock him a little bit at York, given the way that that track had been riding all week, and I completely get the point that's being made that he was better placed than what Believing was here. But you know, Makarova, she was also down the middle of the track in 3rd, wasn't there? And you know, you look at the rest of the horses, I don't think Bradsell necessarily had a huge advantage tactically, other than the one that has been said, his great advantage is that he's just so pacey that he can hold his position ideally, and that sort of allows him to be well placed. Whereas, like Ed was saying, a horse like Believing that keeps looking unlucky, it's because she can't hold a position at those key points in a race. So, yeah, I think Bradsell very hard to beat. For all, he'll obviously need a lot of luck to complete the hat-trick in the Prix de l'Abbé.
And not technically a sprinter, but Kinross, a great time of it for Rafe Beckett. And you can see how much that meant to him on Saturday after the Park Stakes. Rafe was absolutely buzzing, as well as buzzing as Rafe gets in public.
Yeah, I mean, what a horse. I mean, is that 6 Group 2s to add to the 2 Group 1s? And he sticks his tongue out at you as he's doing it. It's just brilliant. And he's one of those horses, you could tell on Saturday that he's one of those horses that has captured the public's imagination. There were the two biggest roars outside the St. Ledger of the entire week were when Sweet William hit the front in the Doncaster Cup. that was a massive cascading roar down from the stand. And then when Rosser came there swinging, he lit the place up again. He's a really popular horse. Rafe looked like he might have something in his eye briefly for a second. I think he means a lot to them. And the one thing about Rafe this season, and Rafe gets criticised for various things, but he's attacking, isn't he, with his horses? And when he said we're going to go and dance every dance now with Kinross, great, bring it on. He's going to go everywhere by the sound of things, which is really good for all of us. So I like that. And he's back on form, and he's going to take some stopping with his favourite little bit of give in the ground, and he's back in business big time.
Billy, talking of dancing every dance, Porta Fortuna won the matron, a filly who's just thriving this season.
Again, incredibly hard to knock her. She just keeps turning up and doing her thing. You know, she's really consistent, even for one with her ability. She hasn't really needed to advance her form all that much to win these races, but she keeps turning up and she keeps doing it. Again, I thought she won a little bit cosily on Saturday. It looked on paper, it looked on ratings and in the betting as probably something of a two-horse race between herself and Fallen Angel. They were the standout two in the race, but really and truly, Porta Fortuna had that race sewn up, I thought, early in the straight. She went and won quite cosily. She was idling at the finish. Take nothing away from Fallen Angel. It was her first start for 4 months or something like that, was it? So I'm sure they'll be happy enough with her. Both Carl Burke and James Doyle afterwards said that maybe 1.25 miles is what she needs now. They both reckon that she wants to step up and trip, and I think they're thinking in terms of the Prix de l'Opera with her, so she'd be very interesting there. But Porta Fortuna, you'd have to think Breeders' Cup Mile. I know she'll be taking on the boys, but you know the style of racing in the States should really suit her. She has loads of gate speed, and she has a turn of foot, so yeah, you could certainly see her making her presence felt there as well.
GC, do you think she's got the tools to crack it in Del Mar?
They run well. I think I haven't studied the race in detail. We don't seem to have had too much crossover between the fillies and colts. So she'll be going against the boys for the first time. But she ran really well at the Breeders' Cup last year. Talk about a model of consistency. She's won, is it now 4 Group 1s? And won very close in 2 others. Really close in a couple of others. So she's been a tremendous flag bearer for Donica O'Brien, and it was a really big weekend for the O'Brien family, because after Donica won with Porta Fortuna, big brother Joseph won the national stakes with Squally Champ.
Beautiful segue into the 2-year-old section there.
Just before we move on, sorry, Dave, from the matron, Ilang Ilang, I thought she shaped well with regards future options later in the autumn. I think 1 mile looks a sharp enough test for her now, so going back up to a 1.25 miles could be suiting her. But, she was a fair way off the pace when you look at Porta Fortuna, Fallen Angel, Soprano. They were all ridden much more positively, and I thought it was quite an eye-catching run from Ilang Ilang, and I wouldn't be surprised if we haven't yet seen the best of her with a view to stepping back up in trip.
I agree with that, yeah.
Interesting for the autumn. Let's talk Squally Champ, Billy. Reversing form with Henry Matisse to win that national stakes. How big a surprise, and what did you make of the performances of the first and second?
Well, vastly different performances. I thought Henri Matisse shaped all over a winner, looked like the best horse in the race, and effectively threw it away, I thought, this time. I've been making excuses for him the last day. I thought it was greenness when he jinked after getting to the front. You'd have to say on his 4th start that, maybe it's not greenness, maybe there's something more sinister at play here, because he travelled like a winner through the race. Even though he was a bit slowly away, I thought Ryan Moore looked in control. He looked happy everywhere, and when he got the gap, I thought it was just a case of how far was he going to win, but he went left, he went right. Maybe he wouldn't have beaten Scotty Champ anyway, but certainly to my eyes he looked like the best horse in the race. But again, take nothing away from the winner, he was very professional. Now, in fairness, he had finished behind Henri Matisse a couple of weeks ago, but he did look quite rusty. That was his first start for a while. He probably just needed the run. He fell out of the stalls that day and wasn't given a particularly hard time. So he has definitely taken a step forward from that. His maiden win early on in the year has worked out quite well. So he's clearly a decent horse. I think he'll probably improve for going 1 mile. Whereas Henri Matisse, I'd say 1 mile is as far as he's going to stay ever. Where Scotty Champ, even though he's by Memas, he looks like he'll go 1 mile. But it might be next year before we get to see that. Joseph O'Brien was talking about the Lagardère for him, which obviously is 7 furlongs these days. And he's owned American owner, so there's the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf is also being talked about. But Joseph has won the national stakes twice. One was Al Rifa, who didn't win a race for the best part of 2 years afterwards, and obviously they've got him back on track this year. His other national stakes winner, Thunder Moon, was a complete blowout, failed to win a race afterwards. So, hopefully Scotty Champ has a bit better luck than him anyway.
It's interesting, isn't it, David? Aidan's 2-year-old colts, Lion and Winter apart at this stage. They haven't quite got, he hasn't got particular strength in depth among the juvenile colts. And Henry Matisse's defeat definitely left a bit of a hole in them as well for the big races in the autumn.
It did do, yeah. I think we were saying last week, Henry Matisse, he'd sort of hinted at potential star quality, but hadn't quite done it. And as Billy said, this was a case of having his chance to go and show it and choosing not to. So, there obviously has to be a bit of a cloud over him now. And like you say, in terms of the rest of them, there's a few promising horses. And I think not just with Aidan O'Brien, but I think this is the case with the whole juvenile colts generally. They're all sort of bubbling under a bit. There's nothing out there that you say you'd be confident saying this is potential champion 2-year-old material. And they're obviously beginning to leave it quite late. So it could be that the 2-year-olds this year end up being a less than vintage bunch, perhaps.
Bit of a change in the fillies pecking order as well, GC. Bedtime Story beaten. Stablemate Lake Victoria picking up nicely to continue her own race-by-race progress.
Yeah, it was fascinating to observe the split times for the Moyglare as compared with the national stakes. It just looks like we definitely have a really strong bunch of 2-year-old fillies at the moment. And Lake Victoria was faster at practically every staging post through the Moyglare than Scotty Champ was in the national. And I can't do any better than quote Simon Rowlands on this. Simon Rowlands wrote a nice piece as usual and said something along the lines of, it's difficult to escape the conclusion that the Moyglare was particularly strong despite the small field and bunch finish, while the national was weaker than usual. That is the view I've taken anyway. So hats off to Lake Victoria. But I'm not sure whether you saw this filly in France the other day called Zarigana. Ooh, she looked the business. She's a really well-bred Siuni filly from the family of Zakava, trained by Graffard, and she looked the business. She's won 2 out of 2 now. I assume she'll go for the Boussac on Arc Day. There's a fair chance that Lake Victoria might go there, I suspect, in which case that could be a real championship decider among the fillies.
Yeah, that'd be a fascinating clash. With a couple of interesting 2-year-old races at Doncaster, well, 2 or 3. Desert Flower in the Mayhill, did she do it for you?
Yeah, she looks a really nice type, Desert Flower. She's a big filly, and you'd like to throw her into the mix. I think some of these, in GC's right, the fillies are much more exciting than the colts at the minute in the juvenile division. And races like the Rockfell, which is next week, isn't it? And Cheveley Park look like they could be proper races. I still quite like the Joe Lyons filly that I mean, she wasn't even in the places in the end, was she? In the Moyglare, I thought she ran on really eye-catchingly, and she might be one to follow over further. But the 2-year-old colts, I'm really pleased that Seagulls 11's a nice horse that Henry Matisse lent into, because that's owned by James Milner, Adam Milano, and lots of the Brighton players, which is good moving forward. The Appleby horse at Donny, she did it nicely. She did it really well. Let's hope she goes into the mix, because you could have some proper clashes there, couldn't you? If the powerhouses are all there, chuck in Joe Lyons and Andrew Balding and Rafe Beckett and others have got nice types. So I just think those 2-year-old fillies trials could be really, really good over the next couple of weeks.
David, the Champagne Stakes didn't quite go according to plan. We lost Chancellor at the start, DJ. It was won, though, in good start takers by Bay City Roller, who's done nothing wrong so far.
Yeah, we got the Prime Minister, but not the Chancellor at Doncaster on Saturday, didn't we? Yeah, Bay City Roller, it was hard to assess these coming into the race, as it often is with these 2-year-olds when they're coming straight out of novices. Bay City Roller had won both of his races to date, but at a much lower level. And he obviously took a big step forward to get the job done in gutsy fashion, I thought. And when you got a horse that keeps winning and obviously maintained his unbeaten record here, you're wary about knocking them. But I think obviously Chancellor not being in there took a fair bit of gloss off the race and Wolf of Badenoch was a horse that had finished placed in the vintage as well. Him not giving his run in, it just might be a case that it wasn't a strong champagne by any means this year, and so we'll see how it goes. But you know, they're fully entitled to go and have a crack at the Dewhurst with him now, aren't they? That's presumably the way that they'll be going.
Well, a beat goes on for Callum Shepherd, doesn't it?
Fantastic, isn't it? Absolutely fantastic. And Bill, we need to return to the ICF for the champion juveniles, been won by August Rodan, Diego Velasquez. Green Impact this time round, and a decent time figure, according to Graham North in Watch and Learn.
Yeah, good weekend for Mark Chan. Obviously, he's carries the colours of the Kinross colours. His first horse in Ireland, Green Impact. So yeah, great win for him. Again, look, we've spoken about this with regards to Cheltenham and other things, and the Ledger. Is there really a need for the Champagne Stakes, this race at Leopardstown, and the National Stakes all on the one weekend? You're talking about the same pool of horses here. It probably suits Coolmore and Ballydoyle, who had at least two in each one of the three races, but not many other people really. That's neither here nor there when it comes to Green Impact. He had beaten Delacroix, the horse that Ryan Moore chose of the Ballydoyle pair, in a maiden, and he upheld that form. In fairness to him, he looked a bit more professional than Delacroix, who was really laboured through the race, doing his best work at the finish. Wouldn't be surprised if we saw him in one of those criteriums in France towards the end of the year over an extended trip. The third horse is one I quite like, Bernard Shaw. He'd won an all-weather maiden by a long way the time before. I thought he still looked very green, very raw. He's a big unit. I think there's more to come from him, but there's probably more to come from Green Impact as well. He's another Wootton Bassett. Like I said, looked very professional. I'm not sure if he's going to run again this year, but certainly he'll be on the Guineas trail, you'd imagine, at the start of next year, Dave.
These 2 years, this is the first crop of Wootton Bassett, isn't it, since he stood at Coolmore, since he switched there. I think it's very positive signs, aren't there? There's plenty of good ones among them.
I think he also had the first winner at Leopardstown on Saturday, that Gerlines filly Chartez.
Chartez, yeah.
Yeah, she's his Wootton Bassett too.
Yeah, they don't get
so
much.
Coolmore don't win the race. They win the breeding race because other people are doing the donkey work for them with the Wootton Bassets at the moment.
And finally on the 2-year-olds, we had the Flying Scotsman Doncaster. We were thought it might be a chance for John Quill, for Sir Michael Stout to take a step on the ladder, but the market told you the story of that race.
Yeah, it's interesting you asked me about that. I'm being asked about that a lot over the last couple of days. It was just a really strange one because it was such a late drift, and it just I was taken by surprise by it because he'd been a little bit weak through the morning, and then in the paddock he seemed fine, and he was backed into 6-5 or something like that. And then just before the off, he was trading at 2.2 something, and then suddenly just took this alarming drift. I can't remember what he started at, but it was 3.4, something like that. And it just alarmed me a little bit. And I just wondered, listen, it could be something as simple as a syndicate that used exchanges thought he was a 9-4 chance. Of course it could. But I also wondered, we showed the replay of his win on his debut at Sandown, and the point we were making was that Ryan couldn't pull him up. And he went all the way down the back at Sandown. And I just wondered whether people might have thought that was him going to post at Doncaster. It was just a bit of a strange one, which confused me, it must be said.
There you go, GC. It's an interesting weekend. This cups, if you want cups, head up to Ayr. They've got a gold, a silver, a bronze. Is the Western Meeting something that floats your boat?
I used to love it. I used to love going for all 3 days. Haven't been for a while, but I still enjoy it. 183 entries for the Gold Cup. Now, I know that the entering for 3 races rather than one, but it tells you that we're not short of sprint handicappers. We might be short of plenty of things. My annual plea to jockeys, if you're drawn really high, don't go and join the low draw numbers. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work. 2 groups is fine. You can certainly win on the near side. I've had a look at maybe the first 8 or 10 in the betting this morning. I think Ramazan, who ran so well last year, has to go well again. Al-Bashir and Wiltshire are bang up there, and I get it completely. Al-Bashir was a fast finishing 4th last year. He was unlucky again in the Portland, but don't be surprised if he meets traffic again. That's the type of horse he is. And Wiltshire's similar. He looked really good when he won at Newcastle, but looks like he needs to come from a fair way back as well. So I think one of the interesting things when you look at the Ayr Gold Cup, lads, the number of horses in the who are going to get running the Gold Cup, who are right on the game at the moment, have run right up to the peak last time out. There's tons and tons of them, so it's a red hot race this year.
Just on Wiltshire as well, people should bear in mind that I think William Haggis has been minding him because of the ground for most of the season, and it is very much drying out up there, isn't it? So it's good ground, I think, and looking at the forecast, it's going to be dry and warm, so it could be on the fast side of good by Saturday. So I wouldn't be backing him until it's final decks, because there's a chance you could end up doing your money in advance.
It's a crackerjack of a race. Ed, are you there, or are you at Newbury for the Mill Reef?
I will be at Ayr. It's going to be it's a good couple of days when you think you've got City of Troy at Southall on Friday, and Ark told me over 1,000 people had applied for free tickets to go and watch the piece of work. So that'll be good on Friday. Then on Saturday, you've got Franny bowing out, which we talked about. Down at Newbury, you've got the Mill Reef and so on. I hope Andesite might run there, Audie. I haven't given up on him. I think he could be quite useful for Carl Burke and probably needed his reappearance at York the other day. And yeah, we'll be up at Ayr. We stay at Troon, which is great, where they had the opening, which I thoroughly enjoy. And my God, you get a welcome at Ayr. It's great fun. Great fun. And I do think Rohan's well handicapped, by the way. I backed him at Ascot the other day. I thought that might be the day for him. He ran okay.
It was a terrible ride that was from Quealy that day. Absolutely shocking. So
maybe Saturday
he does better.
Maybe Saturday's the day then. He is definitely well handicapped.
Can I just make a quick point on that Ascot Rohan race? It was won in practically 80 seconds on very soft ground. I'm not sure that's all it seems, that race as a whole.
They absolutely crawled, and I say Quealy had him steered right out the back, and if that was the day, then it was a very strange ride.
A bit like Donny, our Western meeting is another fixture that the locals, the West Coast, Glasgow and the West Coast, Scotland really get behind. It's rough and ready still, but in a great way. So,
do you remember when they had the problem with a drain had burst and it got called off a few years ago?
Yeah. Yes.
And we still had the show from Ayr. My God, they still partied. They all turned up in all their finery with no racing and just partied anyway. They're great up there.
Just a quick line on City of Troy at Southall. I think it was David who touched on this a week ago. It's going to be amazing that, the potential champion and a real crackerjack horse, the best horse in Ireland, his only ever run, Billy, is going to be his maiden race at the Curragh, isn't it? It's only ever run in Ireland, and now they're even taking him abroad for a gallop as well.
It's true, actually. I hadn't caught that, but yeah, you're right.
So he's going to go from Ballydoyle to Southall and back, and then to California to finish. I assume that will be the last race of his career. I can't see him staying on next time, can you?
Certainly not if he performs well anyway, yeah.
Really, one thing that struck me, Aidan said they're going to bring over the 4 fastest horses they could find to work with him. Are they going to be borrowing British sprinters, do you think? I'm just worried about the work companions. Will there be enough pace available to take him through at something?
You have no idea how fast some of those Ballydoyle horses are, Dave. Have you ever seen Aidan going up the gallop in the Jeep, clocking them on his speedometer? You have no idea.
Yeah.
He'll find fast ones, all right.
I'm guessing Aesop's Fables will be one of them.
He's got to be there, hasn't he? That's Nap. He must be one of them. Oh, it'd be fantastic. Anyway, a bit of theatre. I just wonder if he hasn't realised they haven't got fibre sand down at Southall still. It's a very different service to when Giants Causeway had his trip. But we shall see. We've got that to come on Friday. We'll reflect on what we learned there next week. Thanks to Billy, to David, to Ed.
Sorry, Dave. Just before we go, the Ayr Gold Cup. He's not going to get in the Gold Cup, but this Volterra looks a really interesting runner if Kevin Ryan sends him for the silver version. Obviously, Kevin Ryan has a ridiculous amount of success at this meeting down the years, and Volterra, he's sort of like an Inisherin light in that he's been running most of his career at 7 furlongs and a mile, but pedigree-wise, he's looked like he's going to be well suited by coming back in trip. He's got a half sister by Master Craftsman that was a useful sprinter, and the Dam, she was best at 5 and 6 furlongs. And go back and watch the videos of this horse. He's got to be just as good possibly better back as a sprinter. He's always been keen. He ran an absolute belter at York over a mile last time. And I just think if he's allowed his head over 6 furlongs, he's going to take some catching with the ground drying out. And I think he's going to be a really interesting horse over 6 furlongs. So
the horse who bolted up at the Craven meeting?
That's correct. Yeah, that's the one. So he's got really strong 3-year-old handicap form. Finished second, I think, on his side in the Britannia again when pulling Neil Callan's arms out. And I just think coming back in 6 furlongs is what he's been crying out for.
That sounds like a 2-point win, that, DJ. There we go. That well worth saving there. Volterra for the Silver Cup. That's an interesting one in the Bronze Cup as well. Emperor's Son. Richard Fye hasn't run all season. They thought it was his best 2-year last year. Not seen since the gym crack, but he's got to qualify for the bronze.
Should we do a pod treble then? Should we stick in Ramazan in the Gold Cup?
Oh, what a treble. What a treble that would be.
Yeah.
Scoop will be presenting on his own next week. It'll just be an empty grid of people. Holiday.
Should be Al Bashir, though, really, if the Scoop's supposed to follow, isn't it?
Well, yeah, he'll definitely.
Okay, let's go Al Bashir. Volterra, Emperor's Son.
Well, if the first 2 are in, Ed, we can back both of the ones in the Gold Cup,
Get the cover shot in there.
And a few more.
Things you weren't expecting to end the podcast with. But thanks again to the team. Best of luck this weekend yourselves. We'll be back next week to look back on the action for this weekend and ahead to, well, the future action for the weekend to come to.
Download the Sporting Life app for the best racing coverage, including live racing blogs, fast results, stable tours, trainer and jockey interviews, expert opinion and tips.